I'm just going to talk about one particular topic today. So we have several planned projects that will use CAN-ESM, but the one I'll focus on today is one that was recently funded by the CSA. And so we're currently looking for one postdoc and one PhD student to work on this project. So our research is motivated by this large uncertainty in climate projections, which we know is commonly quantified with this climate sensitivity metric. And according to the 6th IPCC assessment report, it's best estimated to be 3 degrees Celsius. And interestingly, the climate models that go into this best estimate predict both a larger spread in the climate sensitivity and a higher mean compared to the previous generation of climate models. And so we know that this uncertainty is due to clouds. Next slide, please. Clouds are the main source of uncertainty in climate projections, and you can see that here in this plot where all of the climate feedbacks on the left-hand side, these are the clear sky feedbacks, the non-cloud feedbacks, which are basically similar in terms of their mean and spread when comparing CMIP5 to CMIP6. And on the other hand, if you look at the circled part there, that's the shortwave cloud feedback, and that is showing a very different response from CMIP5 to CMIP6. And so next slide, please. Yeah. So we see that the global mean response of these cloud feedbacks is very uncertain and it's very large, and the same thing actually applies to the Arctic. So the Arctic is warming at 4 times the pace as the rest of the globe, and we know that that in the global mean, clouds are uncertain, but this happens in the Arctic as well. So the sign of the feedback in particular is unknown. We don't know if the cloud feedback is positive or negative in the Arctic. However, there is some evidence based on this analysis that my student Calvin Colberry in the audience today has shown that the median cloud feedback for the CMIP6 models is actually positive. So part of what makes the Arctic unique, next slide please, is the fact that up to 50% of the radiation emitted in the Arctic is in the far infrared part of the EM spectrum. So that's basically at wavelengths greater than 15 microns. And so what makes the Arctic unique is that it's a cold and dry environment. And so one of the instruments that will be launched as part of the HAWK mission, known as TICFIRE, is actually going to measure the far infrared radiation emitted, especially in the Arctic. And so this is going to help us gain a better process level understanding of cloud feedbacks in the Arctic, because up to now, most of the cloud feedbacks have been quantified in terms of their broad band fluxes. So typically they're split into the long wave and short wave parts of the spectrum. But the problem with this approach is that there may be compensating errors in quantifying just the broadband fluxes. So overall, we could be getting the right cloud feedback, but for the wrong reasons. And in the Arctic, this could actually translate into different responses in terms of the sea ice and Arctic amplification as a whole. Next slide, please. So our goal then with CAN-ESM is to calculate this cloud feedback, but have a spectral decomposed feedback. So in particular, we're interested in the far infrared portion of the EM spectrum. Next slide, please. And we know that the cloud feedback has previously already been calculated, and it's summarized in this Virgin et al. Paper in 2021 that was based on the CAN-ESM 5.0 model. So we know that this version of climate model has a very high climate sensitivity, 5.65. And that was mostly driven by a more positive shortwave cloud feedback. That's due to both the optical thickness of the clouds and also the amount of clouds. And we also know that CAN-ESM was actually the climate model with the largest climate sensitivity in CMIP6. Next slide, please. However, interestingly, CAN-ESM shows a weaker Arctic amplification signal compared to the rest of the CMIP6 model. So there's an arrow here pointing to where CAN-ESM is. And so you can see that despite having a larger climate sensitivity, the Arctic amplification is actually relatively weak compared to the other CMIP6 climate models. And we know that clouds play an important role in Arctic amplification, especially during polar night when there's no shortwave part of this. There's no shortwave radiation, and all of the warming comes from downwelling long-wave radiation from the clouds that can substantially warm the Arctic, especially in a stable atmosphere. Next slide, please. So then our second goal is to examine how black carbon can actually influence the cloud feedback. The reason why we want to look at black carbon in particular is because CAN-ESM does a particularly good job in representing the vertical profiles of black carbon. Next slide, please. So you can see here in this previous study by Eckhart et al. That the vertical profiles of black carbon in the CAN-AM 4.2 model, so this is a previous version of model, but it was well represented compared to the other models that were participating in this intermodal comparison study. And you can see that CAN-ESM in particular also represents the seasonality of black carbon quite well. Next slide, please. So what we plan to do then is examine the cloud feedback, the spectrally decomposed cloud feedback, and how black carbon in particular plays a role in this cloud feedback, given CAN-ESM's ability to represent black carbon well. So we will also have some additional projects that we can do as the microphysics in CAN-ESM also improve. There are some ongoing developments with respect to implementing 2-moment cloud microphysics and also P3 ice microphysics in the model. And so we'll have some more developments as these more advanced schemes in CAN-ESM will be implemented as well. So just the last slide, this is the ad for a postdoc and a PhD student that I thought I might as well throw in here, that we're looking to hire to work on this project in collaboration with Knut von Seltzen and also Jean-Pierre Blanchet at UCAM. So I think I'll stop there. I'll just discuss this one, kind of like have this more focused project that we're working on. And it's due to start as soon as possible.
All right, I mean, that's great. Thanks so much. You overcame some technical issues, and I think everybody heard it clearly. Just quickly, I've forgotten if you have actually had to put in anything for the survey. Is there anything, like any capacity you need from CAN-ESM or runs that you're planning? You know, once the student or postdoc are in place, that you want to sort of start documenting now?
Sorry, so the question has to do with the survey?
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, should I, you mean in terms of HQP requests? I should fill that out in the survey, or?
The planned run survey.
Planned run survey, yeah, just if you had any plans. Did you already do a planned run survey? I'm sorry if I forgot. Or I have.
Yes. Okay, I see your question now. Yeah, so actually, yeah, I did fill that out initially when I think early on when we were planning for simulations, but now it has been funded. I think now with a more concrete answer in terms of like funding, and also in terms of like the HQP we need, I can refine that estimate that I submitted earlier.
Yeah, I think maybe that's it. Yeah, I had seen it, but it didn't reflect all the things that have happened since you first filled it out.
Right.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's great. It gives a good clear sense of your plans, and I wasn't aware that that the black carbon and seasonal cycle was well represented in the model. So that's interesting. Yeah. So any questions or comments for Ivy? I think she'll be able to hear you just fine if you speak.
Okay, if nobody has any questions for Ivy, then we'll move on to the next presentation. Colin, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you. So you'll all be glad to know I have exactly 0 slides. I'm Colin Goldblatt from the University of Victoria, and here in the room with us, we've also got Clint and Neil, well, some other CCCMA people and some people from my group. In my research group, we do a mix of past and present climate, looking at the atmosphere, atmospheric processes and climate change. And for a few years, we've been running GCMs as part of that work. And we're in the process now of finding what of that work we can do with the Canadian Earth System model, which would be our preference because we're right here with the developers of that model. So finding what capabilities that model has for the work that we need to do. Some projects we've got ongoing or coming up is we're doing some work on millennial climate change with my postdoc, Jake Egan-Nash and Carson Abraham at CCCMA. We have work that we're about to be proposing through the associated with the Hawk project to potentially look at stratospheric aerosol injections. And that would involve Jason Cole and Matt Toohey, who's on the call as well, and also some water work with Robert that he mentioned. And we'll find out what of that will go through CP4C or not. We also applied for some funding to develop some very recent paleoclimate cases in CAD-ESM, which would have gone through CP4C infrastructure, but I don't think we got that funding, so we'll see how we can afford that in the future. That's some of the things we may be working on. The other thing to just say to people on the call is, we're local here in Victoria. If you need any help from people who are local to a lot of the CCCMA scientists, if your students need to come here and someone needs to host them here, feel free to be in touch with me about that and I'll see if I can help. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin.
Colin, that's a really nice offer at the end. And I think, if you look at the vision here can be quite large, right? We can think big. If you think about CESM and what it accomplishes, NCAR has visitors, they have visiting programs, we can use the mechanisms of our universities to get funds for long-term visits and so on, and actually make this a real real opportunity for on-site training. So let's keep that in mind, right? Like sometimes it's easier to find those funds to enable collaboration than to actually fund find salaries, right? But we should take advantage of that, because that is something that all levels of government and all try to do, is get people into networks that actually meet physically. So I'm going to take you up on that, is what I'm saying.
Great.
Not necessarily personally, but people in our groups. I think that's great. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, then we'll move on to Matthew. Are you ready?
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, let's see if I can share what I want to share. Here we go. Good. Okay, yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks Paul and Katie and all the presenters over the last couple of days. It's been really great. I didn't see as much yesterday as I would have wanted to, but from what I saw, things look really streamlined and working well, running the model on Niagara, so that's fantastic. I'll just say a couple of things. I have a couple of slides about some work that I'm hoping to do in my group here over the next months to year or so. Just started off by saying what we do is a lot about volcanic forcing. So, if you look at a plot of, in this case, effective radiative forcing from the last assessment report, before we've got the anthropogenic greenhouse gases and anthropogenic aerosols really dominating things, you see that the radiative forcing from volcanic eruptions is what really jumps out of you to the eye when you look at these plots. And radiative forcing from volcanic eruptions is the primary natural driver of climate variability. And so we're learning a lot about stratospheric aerosol and about forcing from from volcanic eruptions these days from different sources. So proxies like ice cores are giving us information about the timing and magnitude of past eruptions, ever refining those estimates and providing new information. And of course, we also have modern observations of stratospheric aerosol from recent eruptions, so from satellite instruments, but also ground-based instruments, which are telling us how much sulfur is getting into the stratosphere, about the properties of those aerosols and their radiative effects. So really what I've been kind of working on for the last decade or so is kind of bridging between those proxies and observations and kind of translating that into the model world so that we can run climate simulations that include volcanic eruptions in a realistic way, both for the past and into the present and into the future. And so I'll just mention that I'm involved with, so Thomas Aubry from the University of Exeter, together with Anja Schmidt, are leading a sort of mission to put together new volcanic forcing or stratospheric aerosol forcing for CMIP7. So of course we have satellite observations since 1979 or so, and so the forcing for CMIP7 will be based on satellite observations when they're available. But before that, we have a long period of time where we need to build the volcanic forcing from other sources. And so that's mostly coming from the ice cores and together with some information from the geological record. And so in CMIP7, what's kind of new compared to last iterations of CMIP is that we're building stratospheric aerosol forcing in kind of two ways. One is just the emissions, so how much sulfur gets to the stratosphere, because some models can just use that information in order to put into their model if they have prognostic aerosols in their model. But what's still kind of more common is to use prescribed forcing in climate model simulations, in which case we need to take those emissions, the estimates of sulfur injection into the stratosphere, and turn that into the optical properties that are needed by models. And so I've been working on kind of one method of doing that, of kind of translating sulfur emissions into optical properties of aerosols through something called easy volcanic aerosol. So it's a really simple kind of model of stratospheric aerosol transport and optical properties. And it's built basically just on a very simple box model of the stratosphere and some simple scaling or physically kind of motivated scaling factors. And so we're currently now working on sort of a new version of this EVA forcing generator. This is within a CSA-funded project. So again, we're kind of taking into account new satellite observations to improve the representation of the spatial structure of aerosol forcing, as well as the sort of wavelength dependency and dependence on size distributions and so forth. And so in developing this new version, our aim is to sort of make it more realistic but also maintain flexibility for idealized experiments. And so we're improving our representation of both the large eruptions like Pinatubo here in 1991, as well as these small to moderate eruptions, which we've seen more of in the last couple of decades. Yeah, so really, I'm going to skip that part and just say that, you know, on the sort of the first thing that we'd like to do in terms of using CAN-ESM is really just to support the development of this new CMIP7 data set and this new EVA model by being able to sort of feed these new volcanic aerosol data sets and do some runs with CAN-ESM in order to diagnose the radiative forcing. So kind of diagnose the changes that we've made to the forcing and how that represents or how that influences or impacts the actual radiative forcing that we get from a model. And that should be, I think, pretty straightforward. So EVA fields have been used by a number of models, including CAN-ESM already in the past. And so this is one example here from a work on sort of simulating a hypothetical eruption in 2022 and looking at its impact on decadal prediction. So this was led by some colleagues at CCCMA in Victoria, and it's submitted already. And so you can see here this actual observational record of stratospheric aerosol, and then our hypothetical eruption produced with EVA, and then the impact that it has on surface temperature in, I think, 9 different models here, including CAN-ESM. So it does seem like this implementation of the EVA stratospheric aerosol fields is, as advertised, easy. And so it should be easy enough to do further runs with our new version of EVA in preparation for CMIP7. I'm going to skip that also and just say that, yeah, that's our sort of first plan there. I mean, Jason Cole is involved in this project. And so the original idea was that if necessary, he could just do some runs for us as part of the CSA project. But if we can do it within CP4C, that would be great in order to, you know, take a little bit of work off Jason's plate and also kind of set the scene that we're within my group able to do more things with CAN-ESM in the future. And so like Ivy, I'll just mention that I'm looking for students and postdoc at the moment to do some of this work would be great, or related things. So if anybody online here is interested, or if you know of anyone who might be interested, please pass along my contact information. I'd be happy to talk with people. So that's all. Thanks. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. That was awesome. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, that's great, Matthew. Thanks a lot. And so I don't know, I'll sound like a broken record, but if you could do the survey, that would be great. Like just to say, talk about your plans. You know, so as you put together this list, whichever allocation you end up using, like you were saying, I don't know if you were at that part of the session, but we were talking about like the RTD browser, you know, comparing your current runs to other simulations, that kind of thing. So there's an opportunity to use the resources and you know, different ways. So it'd be great if that was listed, knowing that you're actually, it sounds like you're almost fully capable of doing what you're changing is the input data sets. I know it takes a little bit more to put in volcanic aerosols than just that, but yeah, it sounds very promising and a great start to developing more capacity there. So thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any questions for Matthew? How many more questions?
Kristen?
Kristen's last.
Kristen's last.
Yeah, Matthew, I do have a quick one. So this EVA tool, so I assume that is specific for stratospheric aerosols. Is that correct? Is there a way to?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So there's no way to make that applicable to anthropogenic SO2 emissions and tropospheric aerosols.
No, but there is kind of, so there is something similar for tropospheric aerosol that's developed. It's called Simple Plumes. It was developed at Max Planck Institute for Meteorology in Hamburg. And I know that that's been used in some CMIP6 kind of experiments. So yeah, you could look into that if you're interested in something similar for tropospheric aerosol.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, Kirsten, do you want to go ahead and share your presentation?
Yeah, sure. Oops, that's not what I intended to share. Why is that sharing? Yeah.
We saw a slide, carbon cycle related slide just pop up there for a second.
You did see it? So do you see a slide? Because I see our Teams chat. Do you see it?
Actually, carbon dioxide removal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there.
It's
But
there. Okay.
maybe if you went to full screen, yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
there's
good. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, so my name is Kirsten Zickfeld. I'm at Simon Fraser University, and some of the projects with CAN-ESM that we are in the early stages of or plan for the future are in the context of carbon dioxide removal, its climate effects and implications for net zero. So just to clarify, when I refer to carbon dioxide removal here, I refer to anthropogenic removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, so not natural uptake by carbon sinks. And the reason it is important is that carbon dioxide removal is a key mitigation strategy that is included in emission pathways that are consistent with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And it poses a number of interesting science questions. So over 20 years now, we have investigated how the carbon cycle and the coupled Earth system responds to carbon dioxide emissions, but we only start to understand now how it responds to carbon dioxide removal. So there are a number of questions there. There's also the question of a climate system response asymmetry, whether the response of the Earth system to carbon dioxide emissions and removals is symmetric, which is also important in order to understanding the effectiveness of these removal strategies. And then what is also interesting is that many of these removal methods that are listed here on the left-hand side not only affect the carbon cycle, but also have effect on other geochemical cycles such as the nitrogen cycle, the methane cycle, and also if deployed at a large scale affect the surface energy balance and so have biophysical effects. And in order to sort of to understand the effectiveness of these methods, we need to look at them from an Earth system perspective. And so this is something we've been working on in my group for a number of years now, mostly using the University of Victoria Earth System Climate Model, which is a model of intermediate complexity as the main tool. But now we also have interest in using the Canadian Earth System Model, especially because it represents atmospheric dynamics, which we don't have, and and some other representation of processes. So the first one, so this is a project that is in the initial stages. It's about quantifying the biogeophysical effects of large-scale reforestation, specifically the hydrologic cycle responses. And this is led by a postdoc in my group, Marcia. She's on this call as well. And so this is part of project funded by the Canadian Action and Awareness Fund on Nature-Based Climate Solutions. And so here the idea is branching off from a historical simulation to have a number of simulations with different land covers. So a baseline simulation where land cover is fixed, and then a reforestation simulation with various degrees of reforestation. One idea is to fully reverse historical deforestation, and the other scenario would be reforesting, but only in areas where it does not conflict with food production for example, other uses of land, which is often referred to as sustainable reforestation. So this is a project that is done in collaboration with VVAC. I think we know what to do here. So the main challenge, so I think we can use the standard configuration of the model, using standard forcings. The only deviation from standard setup is really making these modified land use patterns available. So another project, so this is in collaboration with Paul and also Dan Posen at University of Toronto. So this is in the very early stages. It's a part of another CAF-funded project, which is more on engineered carbon dioxide removal. And here what we're interested in is to quantify the climate effects of mitigation strategies that involve different amounts of carbon dioxide removal, right? So you could picture getting, let's say, to net zero by either reducing emissions strongly and only having a small amount of carbon dioxide removal, or you could still allow for significant amount of emissions going forward and balance those with significant amounts of removal. But because all these strategies have different co-emissions of non-CO2 gases and also different land use or land surface implications, we could expect the climate effect to be different. So here we're still in the scenario exploration, and we're hoping, Paul and I, to bring in on a sort of a postdoc on board who can then lead this work with CANIAS. And then finally, a project led by my by a PhD student in my group, Rachel Shimuka. She's also on this call, which is to quantify the asymmetry in the temperature response to carbon dioxide emissions and removals. And we've done this already using our model of intermediate complexity, but sort of the motivation for using CANIAS-M is that we are interested in the physical feedbacks. So especially cloud feedbacks and feedbacks that are not represented at the same level of detail in our model of intermediate complexity. And so these would be emission-driven simulations, which deviates, I think, a little bit from the concentration-driven paradigm that we've mostly seen so far. And ideally, would like an initial state which is at equilibrium with the higher atmospheric CO2 concentration. But I guess this is something that still needs to be discussed. And I think there could be also workarounds to maybe start this from a pre-industrial equilibrium. Okay, so this is everything. So thanks, and happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. I guess I had some questions about diagnostic development from a Lagrangian perspective and whether that's of interest. So looking at tracer experiments, both in the atmosphere and ocean, if that's something that's incorporated within CANIAS-M or if that would be done offline.
So let's break it down into like the separation between sort of atmospheric tracers and ocean tracers. I think they're handled quite differently. So, but Neil, I was wondering, did you have comments or a response to that?
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if I 100% caught the whole question, but I mean, generally, tracer studies in the atmosphere and ocean are things that people are interested in. I think in Jim's presentation for the ocean, for example, he showed a type of tracer like ideal age, but there's many others. We've actually had collaborations with people at University of Victoria interested in different trace gases in the ocean, like argon, for instance. So yeah, those are projects. And then of course in the atmosphere, it's kind of a similar thing. People have various tracer experiments that they run. So yeah, adding additional tracers and somehow using those to understand features of the climate is certainly something that occurs in the model. Sorry if there was a more specific thing, maybe I missed it.
No, I was just wondering if there are diagnostics developed specifically for model data comparison and diagnostics that focused on the Lagrangian perspective, so that could sort of evaluate the dynamics, model dynamics. using tracers. So I guess thinking of things like Lyapunov exponents or finite time Lyapunov exponents are just introducing new tools. And I don't know if that's something that would be part of the A4D group or if that's just a different way of interpreting and visualizing the data to examine transport over a range of spatial and temporal scales in the atmosphere and the ocean. And I don't know if that would be worthwhile or useful for various users or if it's something that could be considered, but I think it could have applications in different studies.
Robert, do you have something to add to this discussion or a separate?
Yeah, no, to add to the discussion, I was just curious, Jennifer, if you were thinking like about hooking CANISM up to an offline model, or if you're thinking about actually running the diagnostics as part of CANISM.
My understanding is it'd be preferable to use an offline version. It would be too computationally expensive to do it within the model, but I was wondering if there were existing connections with something like Ariane or some other version with FlexPart from an atmospheric perspective, or if there would be plans to do that, or if it would be worthwhile to consider.
Yeah, I'll just say for so I've been doing some experiments with the high split model, just using the GFS data. And it would be interesting if eventually we could hook up the CANISM outputs into one of these offline models to do these. I have a student right now calculating finite time Lyapunov exponents with the GFS data. So it would be very interesting. I don't know FlexPart well. I know for high split, the data format that you have to write the files into is somewhat complicated. So I know right now there's a conversion script for ERA 5. But we'd have to write our own conversion script, basically for the netcdf files that CANISM produces in order to use it with the high split model. So it's doable, but it's a not inconsiderable time investment, I think, at least for that model. I don't know FlexPart well enough to comment on the other ones, but at least for the one I'm using, it would be quite a bit of work.
That's helpful. And I guess I was also wondering about the availability of downscale products and their use, but
Yeah, so but about the first question, one area that where there actually might be some new capacity needed is to have sort of customized, perhaps shorter simulations. So what came up yesterday is that the default configuration for CANISM is to run for a year and then rerun. It's meant to be a model that's run many years. But if you need high frequency output for shorter, say, observational period, well, observations won't really work, but if you wanted to sort of do short tests, you might want to have a bit more flexibility in how you run the model. And this came up yesterday in a couple of different settings. So that is one slight technical development that might need to happen. Then about the regional, I think so. CCCMA has a lot of regional modeling work going on, and I'll let the CCCMA folks answer this properly. But I'll just say, like, one thing that I have only come to appreciate over time is just how much regional data regional climate model data is actually available through Government of Canada right now. And there are plans as well to extend those data sets that Victoria people can talk about in more detail. But I just wanted to point that out, Jennifer. Actually, there's a lot that's already up online that you can exploit for regional work. And I'll pass the floor to those in Victoria if they want to answer.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, I mean, I did show it in my presentation. There is, plans for extending the atmospheric downscaling, dynamical downscaling that we've been doing for a number of years, but also to add ocean downscaling. And yeah, Paul Myers was mentioning GNC project, which that's kind of will be a connection to the academic community potentially. Yeah, but so there is an extensive program in the downscaling, and I'm not sure that there's much else to be said about it. But yeah, we could talk more about it if there's interest there.
Yeah, so this is something I've been grappling with for a while, and you know this, Paul, which is the relationships. So as we move towards a new or a renewal of our CP4C RPP, right? So the question is, so let's say if we have a couple of projects that we want to use CANI-SM for, so is it realistic to think that we can get let's say the computing time and storage time under the CP4C umbrella, or should we also move forward with the individual applications? I would say sort of that's a tension that I'm not yet entirely clear about, and maybe there's not an answer yet, but I think it will be important to answer that for those of us who may then need to put in individual applications.
I think we will almost certainly need to put in individual applications for major projects. What I remember from being I was chair of the review panel, the relevant review panel for Compute Canada for the RRG stream, which is the individual stream. RPP proposals tend to be less compute intensive. But I'm wondering if we could start to ask now and start to negotiate in some sense with DRAC, with the Alliance, to say, you know, we have particular needs. Can we propose for something that's, you know, have it adjudicated as the way all the other projects are? But if we could start to push the envelope a little bit, I think we could really benefit from like a bump up in CPU and also a bump up in storage. I think those two things would really benefit this community. And the argument would be that we have some common simulations we want to do that we could branch, you know, other simulations from. Our previous proposal, though, we did well enough. It wasn't very highly rated. It wasn't badly rated. It was well enough rated. So I think we should be a little more ambitious than we were last time, but not a lot more. But I don't think we should go. We shouldn't go under where we were. So what I would say is, we might be surprised at how much we could get done with our current allocation in terms of actual, you know, progress on our simulations. We still haven't hit the limit, and I don't think we're close yet. Like right now, we're using about 30% of our resource. Now that might change very quickly, but and realistically, you know, I could see us if we could argue for, say, an increase of a factor of 2, bearing in mind that we were already reduced from our original ask by quite a bit. We could use that, especially as this group grows. So I would say that we have to think in terms of both tracks. But I think the coordination could come where, you know, if there are key simulations that, let's say, I've equilibrated present day CO2, you know, I could imagine lots of applications, that particular simulation or other similar simulations, like long simulations that might not be so easy to get carried out at ECCC, especially with new versions of the model. You know, we could say, all right, there's a new model coming. Maybe it's a bit more expensive. There are community. There are useful simulations we could use as a community that aren't easily accessed from ECCC. And then we collect that together, and then that would give us an impetus for writing our own proposals, more individual, you know, maybe bilateral, just small collaborative groups for larger allocations. And that would actually it would give more work for the reviewers, but it would be hedging a bit rather than putting all our eggs in one basket, which I think would be a risky bet. You never know who else is applying, you know, in these competitions. So I'd say, you know, go so some combination. Yeah, unfortunately, we're following the general outlines of our proposed activity, but one of the things we did want to do is have a few more actual simulations going, production simulations. There was no ROMIC 3 years ago. Now there is. So there's things that have appeared and other things we didn't have the chance to do. So it'll be a combination of strategies, Kristen, I think.